Here's an interesting request. Compare your Truman boots to your Grant Stone boots. Okay, I can do that. Let's go. G'day, how you going? Welcome back to Bootlosophy. My name is Tech. I'm in Gallup in Perth, Western Australia. Kalyakul Wajak Nungabuja. So this video was born of a question I got in my Instagram account. A long-term viewer asked me what I thought of the changes at Truman Boots. And when I replied that, frankly, the owner can do whatever he liked with his products and his brand. And I really didn't get why people got so upset when he branded some of the old favorites as casual boots and the old mock toe styles as work boots. You know, to me, it was merely a reorganization of his styles into different categories. I know there was a lot of kerfuffle about his attitude in social media, but let's put that aside. I have stated before that I thought the categories that we put boots in rather subjective. I mean, is an Iron Ranger a work boot or is it a service boot? You know, I can't see a definitive aesthetic defined difference that would make the Iron Ranger one or the other. And maybe it's what the boot was originally designed for and used for. But even that causes problems with newer brands like, for example, say Caswell. They were designed primarily for casual use, and we tend to call Caswell's designs service boots. But they didn't have an original use as a service boot like the Iron Ranger as a work boot. Anyway, that conversation ended up with a suggestion that I compared Truman boots with Grant Stone. And I thought, well, that's an interesting enough idea to work on. But first, I wanted to compare boots, not brands. I mean, if you're a long-time subscriber of mine, you know that Truman are made in the USA and Grant Stone, while it's an American company, are made in China. But that's not the comparison I wanted to make. I wanted to compare products produced by these two brands. So that meant that I should choose a specific boot from each brand to compare. Now, funnily enough, that's not an easy task, as easy as you might think, because despite Grant Stone's use of some very interesting rugged leathers for their uppers, most of their designs like the Diesel and the Edward and even the Garrison boot, they're all built on the Leo last, which to me is actually a dressy last. Now, Truman, on the other hand, despite some people calling them service boots, you know, they seem more like work boots to me, certainly in a more rugged range than, say, the Diesel boot presents. I think the Truman 79 last boot could compare well with the Grant Stone Baroda boot on the Floyd last. But I don't own a Baroda, so I chose the brass boot, also on the Floyd last, which I think can pass as a rugged work or hiking boot. So these are the two that I will compare. But first, some context. I'm going to be mentioning lasts in this introduction. So if you don't know what a last is, it's the foot-shaped 3D mold around which the bootmaker lasts or wraps the leather around to form the boot. It defines the shape of the finished boot, whether it's slim or wide, whether it's high or low volume, is it an almond toe, or is it a big round toe? I will also talk about the brands, not as a comparison, but to apply context to this comparison. Now, Truman started in 2014 in Pennsylvania in the US, making their own boots in their own workshop based on US-sourced materials. Over time, they moved their business and workshop gradually west across the US continent and ended up in Eugene, Oregon in the American Pacific Northwest. They have, as far as I'm aware, always been known for a rugged style boot, possibly describable as a service boot, but I think certainly matching the looks of a work boot like the Red Wing Iron Ranger. This effect has been doubled down over time with their use of some really incredible work leathers and rugged leathers. Over time, I have owned Truman boots in Black Rambler, in Horween's Java Wax Flesh, in Aubergine Guidi Horsebutt, in Smoke Rambler, and in this Seidel Natural Limerick. In all honesty, I eventually felt that their 70s line last was not for me, in looks as well as in the fit of their particularly unstructured toe boxes. So I have sold the Black Rambler, the Java Wax Flesh, and the Aubergine Horse Butt. All three of them had unstructured toes. I've kept the Smoke Rambler and the Seidel Natural Limerick because they both have structured toes, which feel better for me, even though I'm not a fan of what I see as a strangely pointy toe, but I'll talk about that later. Now, I've never tried their mock toe type, what used to be called the 20 last, I think, but is now called their work last. Mainly because I couldn't get my head around the sizing. They had such precise sort of sizing instructions, I got confused. And I really didn't want to commit to the horrendous freight costs to and from Australia. All of the Truman boots I've had, other than this one, were bought on eBay from other Australians. This one was from a Truman sample sale. Now, going to Grant Stone, they were founded in 2016 by two Americans, one of whom, through his family connections in the American shoe industry, had worked in a footwear factory in China. They established a partnering arrangement with that factory to make their strictly quality-controlled boots and shoes using materials from the US, but also leathers from around the world, including Horween in the US, Badalassi Carlo in Italy, Charles F. Stead in the UK, just to name a few. I'm not sure if it was their first boot, but the one I got to know them through was the Diesel boot, a beautifully proportioned service boot or derby boot with clean lines, dressier, initially anyway, smooth full grain leathers, and an immensely comfortable last called the Leo Last. I then got their mock toe boot called the Brass boot, made on the roomier Floyd last, and choosing the Commander Sole version in Charles Stead's Waxy Commander, a suede, not a rough out. Oh, I really fell in love with this. I've taken this on walks, hikes, and adventures on vacations along the coast, on cliff walks, and into forested tracks, and I think it's worthy enough to be called a tough and rugged boot alongside the Truman. In terms of construction, they're both similar. They are both Goodyear welted, meaning that their uppers and sole construction are connected by stitching each through a thin strip of leather called the welt. The inside stitch connecting the uppers to the welt is on the inside edge of the welt. The outside stitch connecting the sole to the welt is on the outside edge, the one that's actually visible that you can see when you look down. This two-stitch construction method is what makes the boot water resistant, where no single stitch goes all the way through, leaving less chance of moisture wicking through from outside to inside. In the case of the Truman, it's a 270-degree welt. That means it goes from the side of the heel around to the other side. The back end is glued and nailed rather than stitched to the welt. The Grant Stone brass uses a 360-degree welt where the welt goes all the way around. The difference is for looks, really, more than function, where the 270-degree welt allows a cleaner back end without the shelf that's formed by the welt. Inside and throughout, both brands use all the materials expected of heritage-built boots. They use leather insoles and midsoles. There are cork fillers between the two leather mid and insoles, and they use steel shanks. Now let's compare the two. Let's start at the bottom, and forgive the state of the outsoles. I still wear both actively, and I guess I could have spent 10 minutes cleaning them before I clicked on a record button. But I'm filming this in between chores at home, and who has time to add another chore to the list? I do clean them though, honestly. I do look after my boots. But that's usually a Sunday morning job with a cup of coffee before breakfast. I digress. Starting at the bottom, you see the brass boot has a proprietary lugged Commander sole, whereas the Truman has a Vibram 430 or mini lug sole. The lugs on the Grant Stone are deeper, which provides a better grip on the wet stuff and over rocks, gives a confident feel. The mini lugs are actually better on a mixture of sand or concrete or even grass. They are grippy, don't get me wrong, but more in, say, like in a construction site than out in the forest. The edge stitching on the Grant Stone, while it's not inset into a groove, is pushed in under the pressure into the rubber, and so is somewhat better protected than the stitching on the Truman. You can see there the stitching is starting to wear, although it has taken me a number of years on and off wear in the forest trails to actually get here. Now, looking at the welt, apart from the obvious 270 versus 360, the Truman uses a storm welt where the lip that protrudes up and is pushed up against the uppers is actually carved into the leather of the welt, and it has a smooth finished crown. On the Grant Stone, it's what's called a split reverse welt, where the inside edge of the welt is partially split and the top part is then peeled upwards and pushed up against the uppers. You can tell from the raw edge that's showing. Now, both are fine, absolutely fine. Not one is better than the other, in my opinion at least. Both help sufficiently in the extra protection against moisture. Going on upwards, the designs are of course different. The Grant Stone is a mock toe and the Truman is a cap toe. Now, I think Truman changes this from time to time, but this is a false cap toe, by which I mean a toe cap piece of leather is sewn onto a cut-off vamp piece. A real cap toe has an extra piece of leather that's stitched on top of a full vamp. You can go and see my original review to go through the whole construction of this boot. You know what, unless you're going to be crawling around in the iron mines of the Masabi Range where you're scuffing your toes thin, I really don't think you're going to notice a difference. The Grant Stone mock toe is, of course, a play on words. It's made to look like a moccasin boot, like the Russell moccasin backcountry, which is a real moccasin. And in that case, the leather is wrapped upwards rather than downwards, and the vamp piece is then sewn onto it, forming this apron stitch. In this example, it's even a pretend mock toe stitch, a mock toe if you like, because this stitch or pair of stitches doesn't join two pieces of leather together, but rather puckers or gathers the leather around the toes into this seam. And I also like the design of this mock toe apron stitch because unlike, say, the Red Wing Classic 875 mock toe, the stitch is slightly inboard, so it smooths out the profile and it kind of rounds it off. Both boots have semi-gusseted tongues, but on the Truman, the gusseting, quite robust, goes up to above the fourth eyelet, well above any imaginary puddles of water. In the Grant Stone, the gusset stops after the third eyelet. Look, it's high enough, but not as high as the Truman by a smidgen. Both use brass hardware. Both of them are a combination of eyelets and speed hooks, but the Truman boot uses solid speed hooks, which feel like they're like solid posts that have been milled into hooks. The Grant Stone boots use the more usual flat pieces of brass that are bent over. Now, to be fair, I have never had a Grant Stone speed hook fail, but the Truman speed hooks, you definitely feel more secure and more solid. Inside the boots, the Grant Stone boot is fully lined with a soft leather lining in accordance with their more luxurious branding. The Truman boot is also leather lined, but only in the vamp because the shaft remains unlined. Now, both tongues are unlined, which leads to my only criticism of the brass boot. Being a waxy commander, a shrunken then wax suede, it's really quite thin. So the thin tongue feels kind of odd inside a fully lined boot. Further inside, the Truman just has the leather sole with a brand imprinted, whereas the Grant Stone puts a comfortable half sock liner that's lightly padded under that surface of leather, covering from the heel to the arch. Looking at the fit and comfort, both are a great fit for me in the usual half size down from true Brannock size. As measured on the Brannock device, I am an 8.5 length in a D width. In both of these, I wear an 8 length in D width. The last in the brass boot, the Floyd last, does give me room in the toes. It's quite high profile. And it gives me room both across the toes as well as in the profile above. The Truman has less room in profile, but since it's structured with a celastic toe puff, I do feel comfortable and roomy in it. What I don't like about the Truman is the way the toes narrow on both sides to an almond toe, like equivalent. I don't mind almond toes, but in this case, the exact symmetry bothers me. I prefer an almond toe like, say, a Parkhurst, where the inside edge is maybe more round and more fitting around my big toe before this one sleeks in. It's an aesthetic complaint, not one about how it cramps my toe. It doesn't. In summary, I think that was a worthwhile comparison to make. Many people probably wouldn't think of comparing these two boots. Truman starts off, it has a reputation of being a Pacific Northwest brand, which honestly, I don't think it is, just by virtue of having moved there geographically. Mind you, Whites did move there from the East Coast. But there's no denying that they are well-built and rugged boots. Grandstone tends to have a reputation of being dressy, even though they have used pretty aggressively, I think, rugged leathers, and they have expanded their range to include arguably more rugged styles like the Baroda. Using the Leo last, though, it's a dressy last to me, so even if you wrap, rough veg tan rough hat around it, it still looks dressy. As at the time of the recording, the Grandstone brass boot, using a different last, sells for under $400 to mid $400, depending on the leather, and the Floyd is much more rugged looking. The Truman in this style is now in their casual boot section, and they sell for $410 to $520, again depending on leather and shaft height. You do get the quality that those two prices represent. It's true that Truman is more expensive for what you get, because both are fairly equivalent quality products. But, I guess American manufacturing costs are higher. I've put links to both brands down below in the description area. And while you're going down, you might as well click on like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this video, and showing your appreciation would be great, and I thank you for that. And I upload boots every week. So if you like this content, please subscribe to be reminded when my videos go live. I'll be back next week. So until then, stay safe out there, and I'll see you soon.